Hey, check it. The Bible is a historical book. A lot of people don't really view it this way. But if you kind of ignore it, you're pretty much ignoring Jewish and Israel history. So, might not be the best look. You might actually be more ignorant than not if you do it. It's just a book that's attached primarily to a culture and also a religion. So, people look at it kind of funny and they want to discount. They want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. But the reason I bring that up is because this book, Lamentations, still out here getting a little context for this thing. It has dates that correspond to it, a certain historical time period that we can match it up to. And we're just reading here, continuing to get the context as mentioned, and the date for it in particular is the thing that we'll be talking about today in this video. The historical background of Lamentations can be found in the date section of Jeremiah's introduction. The book was written soon after Jerusalem's destruction, literal historical event, and we find out about this in terms of the Bible in Jeremiah 39 and 52, at the beginning of the exile. Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Jerusalem from January 588 BC, history, to July 586 BC, history. It fell on July 19th, and the city and temple were burned on August 15th, history. Jeremiah probably wrote these 5 elegies before he was taken captive to Egypt by his disobedient countrymen not long after the destruction. And we read about that in Jeremiah 43, 1-7. So this idea of the Bible as a historical book, I understand that a lot of people make a lot of kind of exceptions, and there's a lot of disagreement about this. Obviously, with the Bible starting with the story of creation, a lot of people don't think that that's real. And because of that, they're very quick to write off the entirety of what the Bible has to say. Whether that be throughout Israelite history, whether it get to Jesus and people act like there's some big, oh, did he exist and all this kind of stuff. When really the question has never been, well, maybe not never, but the question wasn't always, did Jesus exist? Most scholars and reputable researchers actually acknowledge that he did. The big question is exactly the question. It's the same question that we see brought up through scripture. Was he who he claimed to be? And that is something that's more up for debate and discussion, and a lot of people choose to believe in different directions. But what we cannot do is say that this stuff didn't happen, didn't exist. What you choose to believe about it is a different story. But arguing with history is kind of a moot point. Now, one of the things I think that actually lends to how we can believe the Bible as a historical book would be something like prophecy. And there's a lot of discussion and debate on prophecy as well. A lot of the books that are considered prophetic, people are very quick to say, oh, well, they were written after the fact. So people are writing more of a historical record as opposed to telling you what's going to happen in the future. But because we can reasonably date some of these books, and I'm not saying that it's a perfect science, but because we can reasonably date some of these books, we have an idea about the accuracy of these things and even the predictions, the prophetic things that are said through scripture. So something that I really like to compare it to, and it kind of blows my mind when I think about how these things line up side by side. I recently watched a documentary on, I think it was Netflix, about Alexander the Great. And it kind of showed his rise to power and his conflict and the beginning of him really establishing Greece, Macedonia as the world power in place of and at the expense of Persia. And the book of Daniel actually tells us about all of this stuff. And the reason I bring up Daniel in particular and all this stuff is because if you remember from the previous videos, the book of Lamentations is written pretty much leading into the exile of Jerusalem, the destruction of Jerusalem, and the exile going into Babylonian captivity. So Babylon, so Daniel actually talks about all of this stuff, right? And from this point, he mentions how the Babylonian kingdom is going to be defeated by the Medes and the Persians, which we see in the biblical record and we see in actual history. to be followed by the Greek Empire, the Macedonian Empire, Alexander the Great. Like, these things are actually mentioned in Scripture, which is pretty awesome. And when we look at the historical time frame of those events that people accept as just normal history compared to what the Bible has to say about it, they match up. They match up. And of course, we have the prophecy in Daniel talking about the Roman Empire taking over as world power from the Greek Empire, and so on down throughout history. So we see all of these things, which is very fascinating. But again, people are very quick to discount the Bible as a historical book because they want to eliminate or discount certain aspects of what the Bible has to say. Now, I would argue that we have to look at it, we have to be open, I would say, to considering it from the opposite perspective. The first one being, I'm going to throw out everything the Bible has to say because I don't like parts of it, whether I can prove it or not. That flip side perspective being, if some of the things that the Bible is saying is accurate and historically verifiable, as we can see clearly through extra biblical history, then what does that say about the other aspects of the Bible that I might not believe right off the bat? Or what does that say about the aspects of the Bible that I'm very quick to discount and throw out because I don't like what it has to say? The question that we honestly have to ask ourselves is, could it be possible that this stuff could also be true? I think that this is something that really sets apart the Bible from other historical and religious books. Because when it comes to history and what we can verify outside of the text itself, the Bible as a text, as a historical text, is a lot stronger than a lot of other religious historical texts. You can do a whole lot of research in these things to see for yourself about what I'm saying, whether it's other religious historical texts in the Middle Eastern part of the world, whether it's religious historical texts in the Far Eastern part of the world. You can look at these things and see, are these things telling stories that are completely self-contained, or is there an aspect of history outside of those books that we can use to verify what's going on within the book? And I think that's a very interesting study. We won't go into all that now, but all of that just to say that I believe that we can really count on what the Bible has to say, and in terms of history, but also in terms of spirituality, in terms of society. And I think it should raise questions to, well, wait a second. If this stuff is true, what does it mean for how I relate to the other stuff in Scripture? I think that's a question that all of us can ask. And I think that it's something that we have to really figure out how to deal with. There's a lot of struggles and challenges in how scholars look at these things. You have, I think it's called the JDEP. I forget what the official name for it is called, but you have the historical criticism view of the Bible, and they try to go through all these loops to say, well, this is true, but this isn't, and this is metaphor, and this isn't. But we have to get back to the baseline question. If I can verify this stuff historically by date, and we can know that that's true, what does it say for the rest of it? Could it also be true, or do I need to jump through these other hoops to try to explain what it's saying? Interesting. But anyways, we'll see how all this plays in Lamentations, if it does. But it definitely plays a part in how we view the rest of Scripture and how we choose to relate to it. So we'll continue on. We out here continue to get more context, and there's 3 more sections of this overview introduction before we actually get into the book of Lamentations. And my trepidation and fear has not let up yet. I'm still nervous. I'm still scared. I'm still afraid of what I'm going to find here. But I know that there's something for me, and I hope that you can find something for you too. Anyways, Buff Missionary, like, subscribe, and share, and I'll catch you in the next one. All right, peace.